Being an instructor here at the academy has its perks. One of the perks being that I could fly off if I wanted to and just say, hey, I cancel classes for today. But that's not what I'm going to be doing, at least not today, that is. Today I just did my normal, did my PT in the morning, came, cleaned up, laughed at my roommates, if you want to call the Zell's roommates, at their goofy way of doing things in the morning. It's kind of weird. They tend to roll around a lot, which is, I still to this day don't understand that. That being said, after I shower, get changed, I head off to my first class. It was not a bad day. It was actually quite nice. No real breeze in the air, but the one that was there wasn't cold at all, which was a bonus considering where we are. Then I met up with Lieutenant Colonel Vanskoy, who was going to be helping me with the next class. Idle chit-chat, of course, but, it was pleasant. And as we walked over, we could see everyone who walked past us stand aside and snap a salute. Of course, we had to give it back to them, which was commonplace for all these academies. But we didn't expect too many people to be out this early. We usually got to our offices half an hour to 45 minutes prior to the class just to make sure our notes were ready to rock and roll. This time, we would be giving the class together, as it was going to be kind of a history lection for those that were attending. Eventually, we went off to class, and of course, before we even entered, they called the room to attention, and everyone was standing stiff as a board, as you were, just yelled across as I started opening my briefcase and pulling out my notes. Vanskoy did the same thing, and we got started. Good morning, class. And of course, they responded, morning, sir. Welcome back to our history instruction of this semester. We're going to be going over everything from the beginning of the invasion, since you already know your basic histories, all the way up through today. That way you know exactly what you're fighting for, and the reason why we are so, as some people like to call it, xenophobic, giving the side eye to Vanskoy. He did not like my Zells. He really didn't. I swear every single time he wanted to kick him. I'm like, dude, they're not a puppy, and I swear to God, if you do, I'm going to go full John Wick. As we continued, I looked around and inspected to make sure everyone was awake and alert. I noticed several cups of coffee that were in front of everyone, and suddenly wishing I had brought one of my own. But with everything that needed to be covered, I didn't really have time to sit there and sip on a good old can of Java juice. As we began, I looked around the class and began to put up a few items onto the board. Alright, class, we're going to start with the initial invasion. As we all know, the first group that came in, the correct, to this day I still can't say it. I'm just going to call them the K's because I cannot say it. I peered over to Vanskoy. He just kind of shrugged. It is very difficult to pronounce anything in an alien language. Their mandibles, the fact that most of them have multiple tongues, half of them respond in clicks, other ones talk in pheromones. It is almost impossible for the human mouth to actually mimic their language. This is why it was a good thing that the translators were implanted. When the K's first invaded, we were not expecting them. Of course, as you all know from most of your history classes, that our politicians were originally going to send up our military members to get slaughtered by them, because, of course, politicians don't give a shit. But it turns out when they can easily wipe out two small countries in Africa, literally cutting South Africa from the rest of the country. I pulled up a screen that showed that the initial barrage that they had used cut right across the center of Zimbabwe and then went all the way to the eastern coast, creating basically a dead zone, which was just barely starting to come back into live plants and animals, as most of the area had been cooked quite literally into glass. This, as you know, class, was the warning shot that they gave us. Prior to that, we didn't realize we had aliens actually living among us. Many of our politicians did. Our wonderful leadership. And at that, some of them started looking at me weird. Oh, before you start taking too many notes, you should know that the politicians and leadership we had back then were even worse than what we have now. Whenever there's a long period of peace and not an actual global conflict where they are actually threatened, you're looking at a bunch of serious idiots who do nothing but look at spreadsheets. To them, you're nothing but a number. I want you all to understand that's not how we do things. You are not just another number, and that goes for all of us. None of us are just a number. Though you have your ID number, that's different. As I turned back to the board, I could hear a few grumblings in the background. Before the warning shot was fired, I continued on, we remember seeing that the alien species that was hidden here on the planet tried to make a run for it. This species was affectionately known as the Greys. What we didn't know is they were hiding out here. They had run here because they had officially pissed off a lot of the galactic community, for reasons we still don't know, nor do we really care. What we do know about them is they were using some sort of hypersonics to try and mask their signature. We were having a lot of trouble picking them up. However, they could be detected on most of our more sophisticated radar systems and some of the antiques that would actually bounce off of their star saucer, whatever the hell you want to call them, their ships. Unfortunately for them, none of them made it off this rock. As you know, they were all destroyed and sent plummeting back into Earth. However, it is of note that later on we did salvage several of their ships, and some of that technology was used in the fighter craft that you are going to be using. And of course, as we all know, fighter craft nowadays is a loose term. With that, everyone chuckled. It was an inside joke. As you can see now, at that point, once they fired the warning shot, the wonderful leaders we had decided it'd be a good idea to simply surrender. If we surrendered, at least we could take some time. At least we could figure out what the hell was going on, and at least the human race wouldn't be completely eliminated, exterminated, genocided, or whatever other goofy word you want to use. It's of everyone else's belief now that they wouldn't have actually killed everyone. They would have just killed off the military and then forcibly subjugated the entire planet, taking everyone instead of the 1 billion. It is also of note that the type of weapon they used, though extremely powerful for a heat laser, did not leave any radiation. This should have been a signal a long time ago that the species there, the Ks, did not want to actually damage the planet. They just wanted to use a show of force. Although the massive ships, yeah, if those things came crashing down, we wouldn't have much of a planet anymore. And if you look on this diagram here, changing the view, if one of those ships had decided to simply crash into the planet, it would have been with the same amount of force that it, well, here's the comparison between that impact and a supervolcano. As you can see, it's not as strong as a supervolcano, but it's close enough where if you look at this picture and slide, you'll find that they are extremely close. So close that it wouldn't have made a difference. It is of note that our supervolcanoes are actually something that scare a lot of alien species. Even though they only go off every several 100,000 years, that scares the living bejesus out of them. Reason being, in other alien species, it is extremely common that if a supervolcano goes off, they all die. They don't have a chance to get off the planet. Our supervolcanoes are slightly different than what they're used to, but they'll still do the job, just a little bit slower. As I rummaged through the other slides, I got back on task. Now, it is of note that when they asked for the first billion humans to go with them, most everyone that went was a volunteer. Very few from the Western countries were not a volunteer. I personally volunteered because I did not have a family. I had no wife, I had no kids. My brothers and sisters were more or less alienated from me, so it made me a perfect candidate. That being said, in other countries that are more despotic, at least those that used to be around, they simply just gathered up their unwanted, their unwashed, or whatever the hell was and they just threw them onto those transports. I remember seeing a few of them, and they looked like hell. You think it was bad before. Oh, it got so much worse for him. So much worse. I will let you know that during our transportation, they did not let us know we were prisoners. Though it was extremely boring, there wasn't much in the way of recreation. There was plenty of food, there was plenty of places to actually stretch out, but we had to create our own exercise equipment. We had to adjust the chow hall to run around, do pull ups and things like that, anything to keep our minds and bodies occupied. And I do recommend that all of you make sure you are still on your regiment to make sure your minds and bodies are always occupied. It will pay off dividends, believe me. Even though you have all received the implant, now that those of you who have stopped growing have received it and it is functioning. Those of you that received the implant a little early, yeah, there are some side effects to that. We didn't expect that the human brain would actually incorporate that into their system, but we've had some strong issues. And Lieutenant Commander Vance, will you take over? Yeah, sure. As you all are aware of, we didn't actually get the implants here on Earth. However, when we first started discovering the abilities of these things, we very much tried to implement them as soon as possible. And that was to our surprise that if we implanted them at certain time periods, mainly either prior to puberty or towards the end of puberty, there was no ill effects. However, during puberty, due to the high amount of hormones that go through the body, it is, well, we get some strange side effects. There are actual mutations inside the body, as you can see on this one here. Everyone gasped. Oh, jeez. Many of them turned away as they saw that several folks started to gain extra appendages. One guy was growing an extra hand out his chest. Some girl had a third leg coming out of her armpit. There was even one that the whole body just seemed to go completely pale. Consider yourself goth and then never go into the sun for the next 1,000 years. As you can see, the hormones cause some issues, some of which are quite entertaining if you are into the more pleasure aspect of things. And yeah, this one here, this young feller, he actually grew 2 more penises. This woman here, she has not only a separate vagina, but she also has 4 titties, which of course made everyone laugh. It is of note that most of their nerve endings are actually shot to hell and they can't actually enjoy these extra appendages. So it is of note that you all look into each of these. If you have any side effects, you need to report them. I know you've all been told this time and time again. Now, when the ship actually left, we thought that everything would calm down. We thought we'd just have simple commerce with the new K species and it would all be fine. However, to our complete and utter horror, the first thing they did was they started demanding a whole bunch of raw materials. They started demanding certain materials. We didn't even know what the hell they were talking about. However, our government did, as they were creating such heavy metals. We didn't know what they needed these heavy metals for. And what really was horrifying is when they actually started sending people down so that they would actually start strip mining our planet. That was the metaphorical straw that broke the camel's back. Not only that they take 12 to 16% of our personnel across the planet, but now they're starting to take parts of the planet off. Several parts of the planet are actually still missing pieces as of now. As y'all know, parts of Europe, Asia, what used to be known as Russia, much of Africa is just gone. Australia was almost gutted. They surprisingly left the Philippines alone. America got hit, but not as hard after we started biting back real bad. You see, what had happened, I'm not sure if all you know, but back in the day, our leaders got real paranoid, and once the aliens attacked, it became every country for themselves. They tried to claim we were part of the what was used to be known as the United Nations, And that turned about to be, their fighting force was 50,000 Americans and one French guy. No, that didn't work out so well. So what the U.S. government did is they pulled everybody and every piece of material they could back to the continental United States. And since they were the most advanced technologically at the time, they actually were able to shoot down several of the ships as a warning to the aliens. Now, the K species were not exactly happy about this. However, when we first shot down the first ship that came to the United States continent, and also down toward Mexico and Canada, well, it wasn't the case. It was the Juneshi. The Juneshi decided that they were going to pirate raid our planet. Not so much. We were lucky as that one of our missiles was able to home into and actually get into the engine compartment. We found out really quick that if we could use some sort of penetrating round, as you know from the use of your torpedoes in space, that everything worked out so much better. The proximity fuses would work only on small ships. If anything, it would shake the living crap out of the crew. If we were lucky enough, we would actually knock the crew unconscious and they would simply fall to the planet, as the engines would lose control over everything. They did not like automated systems. To this point, we have no idea why. However, that is the only reason why there is the single base that was remaining on the Return. And yes, we all know the Return, the first fight where we finally took it to these alien fuckers. However, before then, we were barely holding on. For the most part, the K's left us alone. All they cared about was the few areas they was strip mining, but they didn't care about anything else. They didn't protect us from any of the pirates. We had to protect ourselves. Thankfully, we had our own weapons of war that could do everything. That being said, I should make it a point that many countries did fold very quickly. Many of those who were held together by despots and dictators found themselves very quickly falling the hell apart, as you never can hold a country together based on one man, or one woman in one case, because once you take that person out, they're done. They just fall into pieces. Now, it is a high note that the only reason we know of that we were not simply wiped off this planet is that during the pirate raids, they would come in and start taking more and more of our personnel. We didn't understand why they needed this. I interrupted with, and that's what happens when you actually show off in the gladiatorial games so well. For those of you who have not seen any of the videos, as most of them are declared classified, I will let you know it was not a fun experience. They didn't know what type of slaves we would be. At first, they simply auctioned us off, and when they found out that we were able to be strong enough, fast enough, and outthink many of their guards, a few of them ended up very dead, then we were considered entertainment for them and guard dogs. It was a very strange experience, as you're literally stuck up there most of the times tied up, as these aliens would come and poke and prod at you, trying to figure out who and what you are. We found out, unfortunately, a little too late, that they could actually differentiate between us males and the females. And it was, I trailed off and just let that simmer for a minute before I continued. All right, yes, now I will continue with the fact that very soon after that, many of us were brought into different domestic duties, but the majority of us were brought into the gladiatorial arena for their entertainment. They wanted to see how well we could fight. Even though we couldn't put up much of a fight, our strength level is that much higher than that of the standard Xeno. The standard Xeno is used to about 0.42% of our gravity. And instead of just one gravity, it's 0.42. Keep that in mind. We are considered a very high gravity planet, which is why most of the ships did not come down towards the gravity well. They're just not designed for it. Their massive ship turned out to be more of a colony ship than anything else. So that is one of the reasons why we had such good accommodations considering. However, once inside the gladiatorial arena, they were surprised that not only could we outfight most things one-on-one, but we could work together very well. And in some cases, these different creatures or cryptids, whatever you want to call them, were so similar to things we find on this planet that in one case somebody got on one of them and rode it like it was some sort of bull at a bull ride. I'm like, dude, this is not the PBR. What the hell are you doing? Personally, I was more concerned with making sure our wounded didn't get bled out. And that was one of the reasons why I was selected to be sold. As most of you know, some of us were taken for more advanced details depending on how we operated during those games. And during those games, not only could we take down larger adversaries, usually working as a group, but also they realized that some of us, myself included, were adept at field medicine, basically trauma care. I was able to splint a few people who had busted bones, tourniquets, basic first aid, most everything you already have learned. But because of this, many of us were used for medical purposes, which is where I ended up. While this was going on was when your pirate raids, as I motioned over to my compatriot. That's where you had to deal with the raids back here, trying to fight off everybody except the K's. It turns out that we had showed off so much that we became prized as not only gladiatorial, entertainment, for lack of a better term, but also as guard dogs, basically. We did find a few of ours still wearing control collars that were a lot stronger than the standard ones. You'll find out that the control collars are barely the voltage of an electric fence. I mean, seriously, I've got more pressure by licking a 9-volt battery than what was being put out. Most, if not all, of the other species cannot handle electricity like that. That being said, they kind of make up for it in other ways. In one case, I had to watch somebody who was taken with me get their throat ripped out, literally sliced by some talons, and I swear if I find that bitch again, I'll kill her. After that, I remembered to fall back on my training. The same training that you all need to remember. If you're captured, remember what you've been taught. All of you. Looking across the room, I knew I had all their attentions, and I saw a few of them jotting down notes. I was hoping those notes were that of someone who was saying, okay, need to remember this for just in case. Within 6 to 8 months of us actually being taken, it did take a few months to actually traverse that far, even at FTL speeds. I haven't heard anything about jump engines, have you? As I looked over to Vanskoy. Nah, I know they're working on it. It'd be interesting they get that figured out, but I haven't seen anything yet. Well, we'll see what happens. I figured it was time to continue with the lesson. What you cadets probably do not know is how us humans fully got free of that station. Well, as it turns out, at least from my area, we had found out that they had been raiding you. And not only were they taking full-grown adults like myself, but they were taking children. They were going after our children, and we don't play that fucking game. None of us do. Not anymore. I know there were some subsects of humanity that did play that game, but no, absolutely not. I was able to save very few, and then we heard several others screaming from the arena, and at that point, they very much underestimated the fury of the patient men and women. And with that, we took control of the station. We ended up having to do a running firefight for almost the entire thing, and it is of note that most of the projectile weapons that are used by the Xenos are energy-based. I know, energy-based projectile, you'll learn more of that in your physics class. Let me just tell you, even though it hurts, it does hurt, It will not put one of us down unless it catches us 3 or 4 of those hits directly into the heart or directly into the head. It's just the way it is. As some people like to call slug throwers, are far more effective as they use simple kinetic energy. The kicker with that is once they put on their exosuits, they were a lot harder to kill, although still able to kill. And that is where, when we teach you about hand-to-hand combat training, you need to take special attention as well. Because when it comes down to it, if you have to go toe-to-toe or hand-to-claw or tentacle to face with these things, I don't care how you put it, you need to know how to take these fuckers down. Now, it is of note that once we took control of the bridge, I personally took over and used my implant to plug into their system. I need you to all understand that they do not trust AI at all. There was no AI systems there. All I had to do was simply use the command chair to lock everyone else out of the systems, and I was pretty much everywhere at the same time. Just like when you're in your fighter crafts, how you can tell all the sensors at the same time, nothing is beyond your thought, everything is right there. It's the same thing, just on a much, much bigger area. Now, I would like you to all remember one thing. If you end up on one of our destroyers, one of our frigates, one of our battleships, dreadnoughts, I don't know, are they working on carriers yet? I doubt it. Why would they do that? But whatever. Regardless, if you end up on one of those, could you control it by just one person? Yes. Could you do it for very long? Absolutely not. There is a limit to how much the human brain can actually process at the same time. If you're too focused on one area, you're not going to be focused on others. It's just the way the brain is, so it doesn't burn itself out. We've had several people try to control entire battleships by themselves, in particularly that last battle we had where they used the experimental gunship, the one with the 2 main cannons. That idiot cranked it up way too high, and he was the only one in charge. And when he fired those guns, not only did he burn out the cannons, he burned out his brain. He literally cooked right there. It's not a smart idea. Now, aside from that, I will say that controlling most of what was going on was fairly easy. I just had to systematically do it. Locking down the ships, stopping others from docking, and if they were already starting to dock, I simply just locked them down as soon as they got in. I also turned off the environmentals in certain areas to force people towards the arena, and we kept them there. Now, it is of high note, and this is not something I think they have figured out yet, because I made sure that the only recordings are right here, as I pointed to my head. The last recordings were here. The only other copy of that is anything I've downloaded into the mainframe. Now, I want you to understand this. What we did next, we did on basic survival. There are almost 50 different sentient species. Those that are sapient, sentient, whatever the hell you want to call it, most of those are slaves. Only about a dozen to 2 dozen are actual ones in control of everything. So what we did next, I did not feel good about, because I would have loved to have gone through and freed every single one of them. Honestly, it was just, to this day, it tears at me. And for those of you who are part of something like this, it will tear at you too. And guess what? You just gotta live with it. Survivor's guilt is a thing. I'm pretty sure it's a human thing. But what we did is we took whatever ships we could manage, which was mostly cargo vessels, as you know from the battle of when we took back Earth, of course. But I also took a warbird, and so did a few other people. My warbird, well, it's not the same ship anymore. It's been disassembled and reassembled so many times, it almost doesn't look like the same damn ship. That being said, I want you to understand that the ships we took out of necessity. We may have been space pirates at that point, but it was what we had to do. And when we left, we couldn't have anyone know that the humans had just got away with a whole bunch of their supplies, a whole bunch of their ships. So, just as a final hurrah, I released all the creatures that were left in the arena, those that hadn't been killed off. And then I released the protective shields, the barrier that protected the crowd from those creatures. And at least those creatures had a good final meal. As I remember seeing a couple quick images, and I'll put those up right now, clicking on. And of course the entire room. Oh, jeez. Oh, god damn it. Oh, fuck you. Oh, wow. Holy shit. Yeah, they started tearing them apart. However, with the limited number of these creatures and the high number of aliens there, we knew eventually some of the aliens would survive, even though we had them locked in there. So we did the only thing we could do. We blew it up. Caused a self-destruct system. I made sure the self-destruct didn't call out because I didn't need them trying to bust their way out and somehow finding their way to us. Not to mention I did not want to give any of the ships nearby a chance. It must have been confusing as all hell as all of our ships just kind of broke away and took off in different directions. We made sure not to head straight back to Earth because we didn't want anyone to follow us. And that's probably the only reason why we haven't had a full-blown armada up our ass, except for that one main battle group. Well, turns out those were the K's, by the way. They were not happy about losing a couple of their large ships when we came through. Apparently, those ships take a long, long time to fabricate, and we're finding out a lot about the fabrication process, which will be later on in said class. As you all know, we took off at the same time, and other ships went to dock. We don't have any visual image of the station exploding, but considering the very quick amount of SOSs that came out, we're pretty sure that they saw the explosion, but the space debris took them to just apart. You don't forget any of this in space. Whatever speed it goes at it starts on the explosion, is as fast as it's going to keep going. It doesn't slow down. It doesn't arc. It doesn't turn. It's just going your way. So make sure you know to get the hell out of its way if you have debris facing you. With that, Lieutenant Colonel jumped in. Yep, and around that time, that is when we started to realize that we were not alone. When they finally made it back, and the fabricators took over. As you've all very well been briefed, the fabricators have changed the way we do things. Very much changed them. We changed the complete industrial capabilities. We use fabricators to build more fabricators, to build bigger ones. The smallest ones right now are used for domestic use. You get the larger ones are mid-grade, which are usually ones that are going to build your ship. Now, I will say every single one of your ships has a standard layout for sure, but each one will be customized specifically for you upon graduation. Until then, you fly standard. Now, we do have very, very large fabricators, which is how our dreadnoughts are being made. Our fabricators were built in pieces and assembled up by the asteroid belt, and they are strip mining the asteroid belt, even all the way to the Oort cloud, so that we can get as much resources as possible. Since the fabricators break things down to the molecular level, then it is not hard to understand that it takes a lot of time to actually build something that big. However, it is actually of note that the Mosquito fleet, also known as the Piranhas, are very, very effective against alien fleets. They were not expecting that kind of firepower from such small vessels, and probably the only reason why we turned the tide of that battle so fast. Now, also, it is of absolute note that right now the human population was at 8 billion. It is barely at 2. And that may seem like a lot of bodies, but spread out as far as we are, most of us in different ships around the entire planet, reaching out as far as Uranus, which got a few chuckles. Oh, you think Uranus is funny? What the hell's wrong with all you? I think her brother's going to be a little pissed off. Neptune is going to be a little mad, even though Uranus is just full of gas. You didn't know that? Uranus is just full of gas. I'm sure it stinks too. And it's big. Don't you know you can fit 63 Earths inside Uranus? Hey, it's 64 if you relax. You know that, right? Everyone, of course, laughed, and that kind of relaxed everyone in the crowd a little bit as we were talking about some serious subjects. Now, if you'll pardon the interruption, we need to focus a bit more on this, as logistics actually win wars. Tactics may win battles, but they do not win wars. All of you need to understand that without logistics, you don't fly. You don't fly, you don't protect this freaking rock we're flying through space on. You need to understand that the majority of this planet, whatever wasn't strip mined, is now being used as an agrarian world. It is made to fill your bellies. Since we don't have as many resources left here on the planet to actually build what we need, many of the resources are actually being brought in on freighters as far as raw materials. Thankfully, the asteroid belts are just packed with unbelievable amount of materials. Not to mention reaching out as far as Mars. Mars itself has shown that it can get the materials needed to fabricate incredibly fast. It is actually freaky how fast. And a few of you may end up on Mars itself so that you can build and or rebuild your ships as fast as possible. The warbirds are extremely important to our defense. They are absolutely important. Now, if y'all look at history, you will actually find out that the warbirds themselves are reminiscent of the old PT boats, the patrol torpedo boats. As soon as I realized how important these torpedoes were, and the fact that once we armored them, they could truly reach their target, well, let's just say we took a lesson from the pages of history and we added our few notes. During the last major conflict, it is very well noted that the warbird fleet came up from this academy. Your predecessors went up and flew with me, and when we fired our barrage of torpedoes, which unfortunately can only fire once because of the size of the warbirds themselves, there are no reloads, not until you get back. But those torpedoes changed the battle itself. Our big ships up there were getting the shit kicked out of them. Seriously, getting pounded from one side to the other, up, down, left, right, and center. It wasn't even pretty. It was horrible. But as soon as those torpedoes made their volley and several of their large ships went out and started going adrift and screwing up their formation, that really matters. And this is why logistics are important. If we could put more torpedoes in the warbirds without weighing them down way too much, we would. We can't, not yet. However, you can put them on pylons and things like that. But logistically speaking, we needed ships and we needed crew. And for that crew, we need to be able to feed them. And thanks to the fabricators, we can build all the equipment we need to actually feed everyone. It is such a wonderful system. It's so simple. However, understand that on your warbirds, you need to make sure that you maintain a good supply of rations. You don't know how long you're going to be out there. Ever. Last time I did a long trip into space, I was out there for several weeks because I had to traverse my way back to Earth, but I had to take a roundabout route. And I wasn't alone. Everyone kind of looked at me strange. No, I wasn't alone. I had my friends. You've all heard of the Zell, correct? They all nod their heads. Well, the Zell are one of the few friendly species we have. They realize we are not a threat. They work with us. We don't hurt them. And I swear to God, if you even think about hurting any of my crew, I'm going to take your goddamn head off. With that, they were very much paying attention. Now, it is very important that the attacking species have not figured out that our system is so very, very simple. Simple systems are very easy to break. They're not easy to gum up, they're easy to break. Complicated systems are easy to stagnate and make it very, very difficult. However, it is also of note that they wanted so much material off our planet, to include water. Those of you who don't realize how incredibly bad it is that they took 0.8% of our oceans away, it is incredible. Oh, I think you said that. Oh, that's right, 0.08%. That's still a lot of water. That's a hell of a lot of water. They might as well just ripped off one of the caps off the North or South Pole. It's incredible. Now, I want you to understand that the logistics are extremely important on this. And because of that, we are grateful that they did not actually use any type of radiation or chemical warfare, nerve agents, or anything like that. They wanted us alive. They wanted us healthy. They also want this planet. This planet, I don't know why they want it so bad, but they keep sending more and more forces to kind of screw with us. And we keep killing more and more of theirs. Just remember, all these come into play. I will say this, though, as far as the logistics goes, there is something attached to that, and that is the engineering. Now, as soon as I downloaded all my knowledge when it comes to how to build the fabricators, how to build ships, and everything like that, those evil geniuses known as engineers did what they do best, and they took it down to its base elements, they rebuilt it in their minds, and they came up with something better. This is why our ships are actually at sublight speeds, are faster and more maneuverable. We have multiple anti-grav engines that are able to maneuver these suckers a whole lot faster, a whole lot better. The hull designs are actually compartmentalized, which I was astounded. They're big hallways, right? They only wanted one big room, right? Exactly. And that is why we lucked out. I will say, in one of my cases, I was one of the first ones to strike the ventral side and go right into one of these areas. The bright blue flash, we found out, was their atmosphere exploding, burning off. And when it did, it sucked all of it out of their lungs, and they died instantly, which is why we were able to take that battleship in almost one piece. Can't say too much for the dreadnought that came later, but at least that first one. We found out very, very quickly that our munitions, once they penetrate and they explode, will just cause a ripple effect all the way down. It's very well noted that if you strike one on the bow with one of our penetrating rounds and it explodes, you will see it ripple all the way down, compartment after compartment after compartment, because they're not sealed. I have no idea why they don't do this. Maybe it's a cost-saving measure. I don't know. And honestly, I don't care. All I know is it makes it just slightly easier to kill these motherfuckers. Well, you mind if I take over at this point? Oh, please do. I need a break. All right. One of the logistics areas we also need to cover is the fact that we do not use a lot of solid rounds on our turrets. When we do have a solid round turret, you'll see them designed as so. He shows a picture on the board. As you can see, and the video will run in a loop as I'm talking, as you can see, when it fires, it gives a hell of a lot of recoil, and the barrel itself almost goes completely to the back side of the cannon itself, which is why our turrets are not set up like standard turrets used to be. We can't just line them up so that you load them from the back. No, it is much, much more complicated than that, because inertia, delta V, is a real bitch in space. As you've all heard, a few of our rounds have actually struck their ships with enough force that it turned all the folks inside into chunky salsa. And I still find it hilarious when the first one of our troopers got on board and he said, "It's nothing but salsa in here," and somebody said, "So, who brought the chips?" Oh, boy, you ground pounders, they got a very, very twisted sense of humor. It's hilarious, but holy shit, do they really have to think of stuff like that? Ugh. But some of them are quite tasty, I said. Oh, I really don't want to know how you know that. I really, really, really don't want to know. Oh, dear Lord. Ugh. All right, class. Before we get too much into the more colorful areas of this class, I need you to understand that every single aspect of what goes on out there falls under one premise. And that is that humans have come together for the first time ever. We don't give a shit about your race, your color, your creed, your religion, your background, where you came from, as long as you didn't do anything illegal. We don't give a shit. We never did. And what happens? Guess what? When you stop giving a shit, you'd be amazed what you can do. It is absolutely astounding. Now, before you... hold on a sec. I got somebody at the door. What the hell? What the hell? That's a tiny little knock. Tell them to hit that door with more pressure, will you? I don't think they have pressure to give. Opening the door, I just see Junior jump in and jumps up and grabs onto my leg. Hey, how you doing? Oh, hey, Junior. And there's his parents sitting there. Oh, I'm sorry. He's just happy to see you. So it's okay. I turned to the class. All right, you all heard me mention my crew. Well, these are part of my crew. These are my Zell compatriots, and of course, introducing them to the class. This one here, who has got a death grip on my leg. Can you not, please? And he still didn't let go. This is their son. We just call him Junior. Because honestly, just like I said before, it is extremely hard to pronounce their names. And all names through the translator are spoken in the original tongue. So is there a reason you guys brought Junior here? Oh. Okay, well, hold on. I picked up Junior, raised him up, so I was almost holding him like a baby. At his age, he's a little bit bigger than a football. Just a kid. As I walked over to class, I could see that Vanskoy was pulling back just a little bit. He wasn't used to any type of xenos. A little xenophobic, I guess you could say. All right, class, I want you to realize that not every single species out there is going to want to try and kill us. Some species have actually helped us. Some of them need our help. And soon enough, we are going to need to help them. Keep this in mind, because it is a long road ahead of us. It's going to be a road that kind of hurts. I wanted to say it was a road of pain, but I had a little one in my arms who could actually understand what I was saying. I was trying to be nice. Now, I think, is there anything else, any questions that anyone else has? One hand raised in the back. Yes, in the back. The cadet stands up. So you're not afraid that they're going to turn on you and, like, I don't know, bite your face off? I look confused. These aren't capuchin monkeys. What the hell are you talking about? These folks here, motioning over to the Zells, they have saved my life, and they have saved the lives of everybody in my squadron at least 3 or 4 times. At least. They man the guns on my ship, the turret guns, all over. This is not all of my crew either. We have turrets all over my ship. All over them. And later on, I will show you how my ship is laid out so that you can have a baseline to work with. But I don't know what the hell you're talking about. These are not wild animals. These are my friends. And with that, the cadet simply sat down a little bit in shame. Another hand went up. Yes, cadet, what do you got? Sir, why don't we ever use nuclear weapons? I mean, I know we can't use them on the planet, but why don't we ever use them in space? I mean, aren't they that destructive? I actually put my hand on Junior's head and ruffled the top of his head just a little bit as Vanskoy jumped in. Well, you see, you need to pay more attention in your physics class. If you know that, you know that the actual force of the nuclear explosion being used is Nothing. Unless you have it buried deep into the ship where it can use atmosphere to create the actual blast wave. The actual destructive power of a nuke in space is pretty useless. It won't cause the problems you're thinking. Now, what it does put out is a whole bunch of radiation, and it puts out a whole bunch of electromagnetic pulse. The electromagnetic pulse, now, if we could just have that, would be fine, because then we could disable the ship and take the ship, and then we'd have more at our disposal. The problem is, you don't need to radiate a ship. You radiate that sucker too much, and then you can't use it. Not to mention, because the universe is full of electromagnetic activity, and it is full of radiation. A lot of these ships, especially anything destroyer level or higher, are just covered completely with materials that are designed to stop EMP and radiation. So honestly, you're spending all that time, all that money with a very dangerous piece of equipment when you would get more out of just a standard charge. The standard charge itself ends up blowing a hole, which ends up causing atmosphere to vent, which causes, as you know, compartments to drain of atmosphere and the crew to croak. Any other questions on that one? The cadet sat down, and she was, again, a little put back at this. She didn't understand it fully. I regained a little bit more composure, and I handed Junior back to his parents, and I asked them, "Hey, can you just wait for me outside?" As they left, I said, "All right, class, it's getting close to the end of the lecture. We'll talk about more of this tomorrow if you have any additional questions. Just understand that what you're doing is going to be unbelievably important. All of you are 17, 18 years old. You're brand new to this academy. You've only been here, 2 weeks? Understand this. What you are going to be doing is extremely important, but is also extremely dangerous. And the more knowledge you have, the more drill time you have, the better you design your ship for you so that you can use it to its absolute maximum capacity, the higher chance you are going to be to survive, and the higher chance you can protect our planet. Because we can't move this planet. If we could, we'd jump it to another solar system, to a whole nother sector, so we could hide it from those who want to take it from us. But we can't. What we can do is use our knowledge, our engineering, our know-how, our ingenuity, our sheer determination and rage and hatred for those that have come to take this world from us, to take our families from us, to take everything from us, and use us for their own nefarious and in some cases brutal and in other cases disgusting uses. Ugh. Because of them, we will always have to be vigilant. We will always have to have the fleet ready. And soon enough, you will be part of the fleet. Now, I'm looking at the time, and this class has almost been going on for an hour, and I know many of you have another lecture here. So we're going to break for today. And unless, Lieutenant Colonel, you have something else? No, that pretty much covers it for today. All right. So, as of now, we're going to just leave it for today. Reaching over, I grab my papers and items, put them in my briefcase, and I go to leave as the class begins to murmur to each other just a little bit. The Lieutenant Colonel does the same thing. We both go to walk out. And as we do, of course, we hear, "Room attention!" Everyone jumps to their feet, as you were, as we leave. I reach over with my crew, and again, Junior jumps into my arms. "So, lunch?"